Seems you have become irritated, and it's the reason you are calling me a liar many a times in this last letter of yours.
Yeah, I get irritated when people lie to me. You've lied repeatedly and you're still doing it.
I do not recall any instance when I spoke a lie to you.
Then read my last letter to you again. I explained each time you lied to me. These were not innocent errors on your part. You knew better.
However, to deny existence of God is one's lying to himself.
That too is a lie. As is asserting as fact that which is not evidently true.
You do not have a belief system as far as articles of faiths for any religion is concerned. But what I am trying to convince you is that atheism is an ideology which starts with negation of God.
Wrong. There is no neither nor want to negate something that was never implied. Most atheists would actually rather believe in a God, but they know that simply wanting to believe something will not make it be true. Such people value truth too much to make believe like you do.
And then it examines every evidence with the perspective that each and everything has, in some way, come into existence from simple things, and can be thus explained. There is no necessity of God.
Change the word God to magic, and then we'll be talking about the same thing. It seems you don't understand either side or theology either.
Atheists do not try to think of the possibility of existence of God.
Yes, we do. In fact, most of us have probably given that more thought than you have. But imagining things don't make them true.
This is what I am calling as their one and only article of faith. To start with the assumption that God does not exist.
Well, you've been wrong about absolutely everything else you've ever said to me. Why not be wrong about this too?
Even for theoretical consideration, they do not want to accept the possibility of existence of God.
Yes, we do, but as I already told you, and you obviously ignored, science accepts that many things may be possible, and no possibility is ever dismissed until disproved. However, we can only posit what is supported as compared to what is not supported, and your God is not supported. Logically, the conversation should end there, and not come up again until or unless you've found some evidence for your as yet unsupported, unjustified and indefensible claims.
Well, I have replied you back in every letter of mine that those were not any clues suggesting evolution to be true.
No, you didn't, nor could you have, since I have yet to share any of those cues and clues with you. What we need to do first is to show you what evolution is. Then I can prove it to you.
You did not reply me that which one arise first? The living being, with well-formed structures which then created their code of life for replication, or the genetic code that gave rise to perfect life?
I have already answered this question for you, but I'll clarify since you're prone to miss details. Technically the cell came first, but it wasn't alive yet, and certainly wasn't well-formed. Genes came after and have still never yet produced perfect life.
Surely a cell cannot think of making itself up and then transmitting its characteristics to its descendants in the form of a code.
It isn't in the form of a code, and it isn't deliberately thought out either.
And RNA to get formed by itself, then replicate continuously, without getting destroyed, and then code for the cell membranes. Just because they are RNAs, do they need to understand what code is befitting to create a membrane which is selectively permeable?
The phospholipid bilayer, cell membrane, like RNA, forms naturally, spontaneously as a result of its chemical polarity in an aqueous environment.
If that membrane was formed by chance, how will the RNA know how to transmit it to its progeny, how to localize it from destructive forces of nature?
When you were born, did your cells think? When the blood cells in your body clot around a wound incidentally making new skin, are they doing that deliberately?
So, no, you have not convinced me of evolution.
Can you even tell me what you think evolution is? And then I'll tell you what it really is. Here is a hint. Watch my video on the sixth foundational falsehood of creationism. Then tell me what you think evolution is, and what you would need to see in order to be convinced.
You are trying to sound truthful by saying that you do not know how life started to exist, but you are actually trying to convince that science has got all answers, and ultimately you will be able to explain it once science progresses.
I don't care if I sound truthful or not. I am truthful, and that's what matters. As I said in a previous message, which you obviously ignored, throughout history, every time we tried to use supernatural forces to explain things we did not yet understand, the supernatural explanations have always turned out to be wrong. Epilepsy was once believed to be demonic possession. Early Protestants taught that diseases were spiritual curses. The planets were anthropomorphized. Comets were omens from the gods. Lightning was blamed on either Zeus or Thor, depending on where you lived, and the part of your god was played by a volcano in Exodus, which was obviously written before we knew about tectonic plates. In each case, the supernatural excuse proved to be wrong, and the real explanation turned out to a whole new field of study beyond the imaginations of the men behind the old myths.
This is the same type of faith that Darwin had, when he said that more unearthing of fossils will bring evidences in support of his theory, but the evidences that came up were destructive to Darwin's theory.
This is another lie. 3 lies in one. 1. Darwin predicted that if his theory were true, then we should find these things, and if it was not true, then we wouldn't. That is nothing like faith. 2. We found exactly what he said we should find. 3. While hundreds of definitely transitional fossils have vindicated Darwin's theory, there has never been any fossil ever found which was destructive to it.
It showed that living things abruptly arose on Earth within a short era of time, the Cambrian explosion.
Another set of lies. 1. Living things first arose roughly 3 billion years before the Cambrian era. 2. The Cambrian explosion is a period of roughly 50 million years. 3. Some multicellular species were already extinct before the Cambrian. And 4. There were no chordates beyond very primitive fish. 5. Every species that was alive then is extinct now. All that happened in the Cambrian, actually a bit before then, was that life went multicellular, and experimented with many different shapes before settling on some that worked especially well. All of that is concordant with evolutionary theory.
Then what?
More advanced chordates, amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, as well as insects did not appear until long after the Cambrian.
The theory of punctuated equilibrium was proposed because even an impossible explanation is acceptable to many but not the creation.
1. Creation is the impossible explanation. Miracles are impossible by definition. 2. Punctuated equilibrium doesn't qualify as a theory. It is only a law. 3. Punc-eq is an explanation of why there are periods of relative stasis between periods of relatively rapid transition.
It is not necessary for humans to know how they came into existence.
Yes, it is.
Rather, it is more necessary to know why we exist.
And your religion doesn't teach that either. All it does teach are things no one can show to be true, and things everyone should know are not true.
If we do not know that, we lose our life in vain doing that, which we are not supposed to do.
Yes, we do know for certain that the global and the Tower of Babel did not happen the way the Bible describes. The same is true for many of the other stories in the Bible as well.
It is the same thing like a student needs to know the course book thoroughly. He reads to pass exam and has no time to waste in reading unrelated things.
I know both sides of this discussion better than you know your own alone. The Bible is probably among the most unrelated things you could waste your time reading. But I tell everyone they should read the Bible. How else are you going to know for sure how wrong it is?
Similarly, Life is having a limited duration of span which differs for everyone but is of a maximum of 100 years for current individual.
And yet we have lots and lots of people who are older than that. Don't you ever get tired of being wrong every time you say anything?
So if we do not know why we exist, we may waste our life in things which will not benefit our purpose of existence.
That more than anything else is why you should be atheist.
We exist, and we know that we do exist, but why?
Science has an explanation for that, but religion does not.
You search for how, and keep considering one explanation after another, of how we might have come up without interference of an entity. Taking evidences after evidences as the final solution to the riddle, and hoping that this riddle will soon solve.
Wrong again. 1. All the evidence points to only one conclusion, not one after another. 2. Many evolutionary biologists have been or still are theists, so accepting evolution obviously does not require the rejection of a god. Those who believe otherwise are pleading for magic at the expense of science. 3. There has never been any evidence implying a god or the miraculous creation of anything. 4. There is substantial evidence to imply that man created God in his own image. 5. Science cannot posit that which is not indicated, and which cannot be distinguished from the illusions of delusion. So there is no need to include or exclude that which was never indicated in the first place. 6. Only accurate information has practical application. And the absolute best we can say about your information is that there is no way to show whether anything you say is true to any degree at all.
But at the end, if existence of God is proven after 50 years, and you are already dead by that time, will you get an opportunity to rewind your life?
1. Your God can never be proven by definition. 2. Everything I just said above would still apply whether your God exists or not. 3. Even if your God exists, you're obviously wrong about it, and you're obviously wrong about a great many other things too. 4. Exploring reality will improve your understanding of it, and increasing knowledge is its own reward. If you had that, you wouldn't even think about ruining your life, regardless whether anyone's God exists or not.
I asked you about your problems with Islam and Quran, but you did not reply anything earlier.
Yes, I did, above and below and in every previous post.
You are now quoting Bible. Muslims do not have any concept of Tower of Babel's global flood, 60,000 years old earth, etc., etc. So do not mess Islam with Christianity.
Yes, you do have these concepts. Your Quran says so, and so do Hamza and Adnan.
Muslims do believe in Jesus, peace be upon him, as one of God's prophet, but Quran corrects many misunderstandings of Christians about the concept of God.
The Quran replaces one set of errors for another set of errors. You cannot show that any of it counts as a correction, because there isn't any portion of your particular belief system which you can show to be true.
That's why sincere seekers of truth turn to Islam.
Sincere truth seekers reject all faith-based beliefs, because faith itself is inherently dishonest.
You have to think for yourself, what evidence will you accept, and then pray to God to give you proof of his existence. God guides to himself those people who really want to accept truth.
You're suggesting that I should commit to the logical fallacy of the assumed conclusion. That I should just assume that your God exists, and then start talking to it until I begin to believe that I'm getting an answer. That is the exact same thing that Christians do when they hear Jesus. It is the same thing Hindus do when they hear Krishna. It is the same thing aliens do when they hear secret transmissions from extraterrestrial reptiles. It is the same thing Scientologists do when they intercept psychic messages from Lord Xenu. That sort of confirmation bias works for whatever the subject is, regardless whether it was real or not. But if it really was real, such practice would not be required.
As for myself, I studied the Quran with an intention of accepting or rejecting faith, but evolution kept on pricking my mind even after getting convinced with Quran. But when I restudied evolution, I understood that it is not a convincing scientific theory, but a propaganda to misguide people into atheism.
You have not studied evolution. You don't even know what it is.
We need to imagine certain things to get the good explanation of existent facts.
No, we don't.
Gravity is an imagination.
No, it isn't.
But we need to keep it in scientific books because it explains many observed phenomena correctly.
And we can prove that it really exists, unlike anything believed exclusively by Islam.
Bible does not exist in its original language of revelation, so it may not be soul-satisfying for its followers who get deluded with wrong choice of its wording. Take for example the creation story from Genesis and compare it with the Quran. Quran does not describe the 6 days of creation as consisting of mornings and evenings, so one cannot call Quran unscientific.
I certainly can call the Quran unscientific. I could do so exclusively because it requires faith. I could do so again because no honest belief would threaten unbelievers simply for not believing. In order to be scientific, one must first reject faith, and then learn to question all assumptions and test for errors. Your religion will not allow that because it is unscientific by definition.
The same as the description of living things arising on earth and their sequence. Quran is silent on these aspects, so it cannot be dismissed of being unscientific.
The fact that your fables fail to provide any information that is either useful or accurate is yet another reason to call it unscientific.
The science has shown that there was a Big Bang which was well controlled to create the universe with galaxies and its stars.
Science has not shown that there was anything controlling the Big Bang or the creation of the cosmos.
There was Cambrian explosion which caused abrupt emergence of living things on Earth in most complex ways.
Wrong again on multiple levels, as I have already explained.
So science does give evidence in favor of theism.
No, it does not, and cannot.
And how does it keep you stay an atheist?
How could I possibly believe otherwise?
I do not know.
That much is obvious. The thing that most impresses me about creationists is how anyone can be so consistently proven to be absolutely wrong about absolutely everything, 100% of the time for such a long time, and still believe theirs is the absolute truth.
So what I want to say is that you start with the assumption that God cannot have any role in creating you or this universe, and then keep collecting evidences in favor of your assumption.
Why do you want me to lie to you? Don't you have imams for that? You are the one using confirmation bias and the logical fallacy of the circular argument to root back to the logical fallacy of the assumed conclusion. Do not project your own faults and fallacies onto those who object to them. I will not share these dishonest traits with you. I seek truth instead.
History has shown that people who committed atrocities did not do it to please God.
Wrong. History has shown, as Voltaire observed, those who believe absurdities commit atrocities. Are you actually suggesting that
In fact, it was their racism and supremacism which was asking them to behave that way. God does not instruct humans to do injustice to each other.
The Bible and the Quran both condemn and command people to perform unjustifiable acts of cruelty.
And with God is the end result when we all will be raised up for judgment.
Sadly, your religion does not judge you for your intelligence or your humanity. It only rewards gullibility and obedience. Why is that? Because it is not God who is judging you, but the founders and leaders of religion. They secure their power through your unquestioning obeisance. That's why they promise unimaginable rewards in an imaginary afterlife, and anyone too smart to fall for that is threatened with a fate worse than death. Again, in an afterlife that will never really come.
He knows what lies in our hearts, so we cannot hide our intentions from him. After all, he created us, right?
Obviously not.
But all we have to do is to do our best in our efforts, keeping ourselves reminded of existence of God and of hereafter when we will be facing him.
If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it, right? That's why you keep telling yourself what you do. It is literally a matter of make-believe.
Currently atheists are talking about rights of human being on each other, and that is a good development among them.
Why aren't Muslims doing the same thing? Why aren't Christians doing that either?
But we must not forget that communism was also an ideology based on atheism, taking lives of millions of people, depriving them of their right to exist.
While it is true that most of the early communists were atheists, it is not true that communism is based on atheism. Nor could that be true. The inventor of the printing press was a Christian, and the first book printed was the Bible. Does that mean that the press is based on Christianity?
Seems you have no knowledge about how Walcott unearthed the Cambrian explosion evidence at Burgas Shale in 1912, and kept them hidden without reporting, as it was supposed to disprove Darwinism, something he did not want to happen.
It seems you have no knowledge of that either, since it didn't happen. Neither could the Burgess Shale have presented any challenge to Darwinism. Remember that Darwin wrote about the rapid increase in fossil forms during the Cambrian, and that was decades before the discovery of the Burgess Shale.
Piltdown Man was created to support evolution of man.
No, it wasn't. It seems to have been created to humiliate the British Museum. No one really knows, as the actual culprit has never been positively identified. Some of the suspects sought personal gain by taking the museum's money. Another suspect hated the museum for their rejection of magical beliefs. No kidding. Arthur Conan Doyle was Dawson's next-door neighbor, and he had written about this exact type of fraud years before it happened. He believed in fairies, and the scientists of his day ridiculed him for that. Piltdown Man may have been his revenge. I explain this in the 13th foundational falsehood of creationism.
Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny was coined falsely to support evolution.
Wrong. Haeckel used that argument to promote his own version of embryology over that of Ernst Bayer. I explain this in the 13th FFOC2. I cover it again when I explain the laws of evolution.
Even the experiment on moths about Industrial Revolution of England was a fake.
No, it wasn't. Jonathan Wells and a number of others lied about whether these moths were ever found on tree trunks. More recent studies show that the majority of them are. I explain that in the 13th FFOC2.
What does it prove?
It proves you have no idea what you're talking about.
It says that there are humans who are actively efforting to prove evolution, even if it be with lie.
No, it proves that creationists are willing to lie in order to prove evolution wrong. Just to prove that point, here is a challenge which no one has ever answered. The first part of the challenge is to name one evolutionary scientist who lied while promoting evolution over creationism. You can't do it because it has never happened. The second part of the challenge is to name one creationist who did not lie in the promotion of creationism over evolution. You can't meet the challenge either because there has never been a credible proponent of creationism anywhere ever.
That's why I say that atheism is a faith one tries to stick to and not to change.
You've just told me two more lies. 1. Atheism is not a faith. It is the rejection of faith. 2. You are the one beholden to a belief system which requires that you stick to it and not change. Do you want me to prove that too?
By definition, no apparent, perceived, or claimed evidence in any field, including history and chronology, can be valid if it contradicts the scriptural record. Answersgenesis.org. Verbal inspiration guarantees that these writings, as originally and miraculously given, are infallible and completely authoritative on all matters with which they deal, free from error of any sort, scientific and historical as well as moral and theological. Institute for Creation Research, inspired, infallible, the inerrant Word of God in all of their parts, and in all matters of which they speak, history, theology, science, etc. Mark Cadwallader's Creation Moments. The Bible is the divinely inspired written Word of God. Because it is inspired throughout, it is completely free from error scientifically, historically, theologically, and morally. Thus it is the absolute authority in all matters of truth, faith, and conduct. The final guide to the interpretation of the Bible is the Bible itself. God's world must always agree with God's Word, because the creator of the one is the author of the other. Thus, where physical evidences from the creation may be used to confirm the Bible, this must never be used to correct or interpret the Bible. The written word must take priority in the event of any apparent conflict. Mark Ramsey's Greater Houston Creation Association. Revealed truth, that which is revealed in Scripture, whether or not man has scientifically proved it. If it is in the Bible, it is already true without requiring additional proof. Fallacy, that which contradicts God's revealed truth, no matter how scientific, how commonly believed, or how apparently workable or logical it may seem. Bob Jones University, Biology Student Text, 3rd edition Volume 2.
You will not likely find any creationist organization who does not endorse the dishonest dogmatism above, but you will never find a scientific, evolutionary, or atheist website endorsing anything like this. Because religion is dishonest, and science is only interested in whatever is really true.
Assembly of ribonucleotide does not create life, and so even if this experiment was correctly performed depicting natural condition, it does not speak about emergence of cell, which needs plenty of reactions in different compartment to be performed at right place and in right proportion.
The development of living cells from replicative polymers is a multi-stage process, and it does indeed begin with the formation of RNA. These experiments are therefore right in line with what we should expect of the prebiotic Earth.
But the experiment was in itself showing that the phosphates, the reactive compound, were added last so that they should not finish themselves off by reacting earlier.
Once again, not every chemical is present everywhere all the time. So of course some chemicals can be introduced later, even if it were only by accident with no one involved.
This experiment needed efforts to create nucleotide.
No, it didn't. It duplicated conditions which could have occurred entirely incidentally with no effort at all.
And after ribonucleotides are formed, we need to get other components necessary for the formation of one cell.
Yes, and this can occur incidentally as well.
Craig Venter took so much of efforts to make a living cell replicate with another DNA, so these processes cannot just happen to originate and continue perpetually.
Craig Venter was creating whole cells. We still don't know every stage of the natural process, but we are figuring that out.
So even if a few molecules of RNA get formed from nucleotides, there is a long journey of perpetual vigilance for the living cell to arise and then to continue existing without dying.
That is the only thing you have said so far that is true.
Life cannot arise without God's directing it in a fully planned way.
God evidently does not exist, and life apparently can arise naturally. There is no need to believe in magic. As I said, every time we have ever turned to religious explanations, they have always turned out to be wrong. Always, without exceptions. What is worse is that as long as the religious belief remains popular, it prohibits or retards all progress. Religion has always only ever proved to be a total failure, and an endless pack of lies. Please awaken from your delusion.